10. Painting veins. Back in the 17th century in Europe, many people believed that extreme paleness was just the hottest thing. If you looked whiter than a ghost, then you were like the Megan Fox of the town. Many women were obsessed with finding new ways of making themselves look pastier than a white wall, and some of their methods were actually surprisingly creative. The cosmetic skills of women back then were actually pretty impressive, I must say. Wealthy aristocratic women were the ones who took part in this pale trend the most. They wore dresses with plunging necklines to show off the girls, and they painted themselves white using a powder. Frankly, this powder made them look pretty artificial, like you could tell that they weren't actually naturally that white, so to solve this they came up with a new beauty trend: drawing veins. Women would draw veins on their mommy milkers using a blue color to mimic the look of translucent skin. It's crazy to think how far we've come from this, because back then people were trying to look as pale as possible, and now we have people tanning themselves so much that it causes controversy. At number 9. Tiny teeth. During the Renaissance, fashion and beauty standards were changed drastically from what was popular in the years before. So much in society changed over this period of time, like what was seen as beautiful or desirable. Things like certain body types and other physical attributes had their own trends, but one of the weirdest physical beauty trends from back then had to do with teeth. Back then, the ideal woman had wide hips, a small waist, long legs, and small teeth. Yeah, teeth had an ideal size. To people back then, the smaller the teeth, the more desirable you were. Why? I don't know. Because people are weird, I guess. Some people would even go as far as to file their teeth down to make them smaller so that people would see them as more attractive. Now, I can imagine that this would be a very painful process. Like if you've ever chipped a tooth, then you know that uncomfortable, almost cold sensation of a broken tooth, so imagine that, but on all of your teeth. Yeah, you can count me out. Before we carry on talking about some of these strange things people did to be the belle of the ball, and yeah, there were some really weird things, why not take a moment to leave a like on this video if you're enjoying it so far, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel to see more videos like this one. At number 8. Nails for days. These days, people get their nails done all the time. I love seeing crazy nail art videos online because they're often so creative. Some of the most fascinating ones are the crazy long nails. I don't think I could ever rock those, but I still admire those who can. The beauty trend of having long nails, though, isn't a new thing. It's been a symbol of beauty and status for many years, like years ago in China. Back then, having super long nails was seen as a way to show off your wealth and status. The average nail length amongst Chinese aristocrats was up to 25 centimeters or nearly 10 inches. This was all their natural nails too, and in order to protect their insanely long nails from breaking, they wore nail guards made out of gold. Not only did that protect their nails, but it was also another way of showing off their wealth, because not everyone can live their lives wearing gold cages on their fingers. As you can imagine, having nails that long made it so you could barely do anything with your hands, and so that's why these aristocrats had servants, so they could perform the tasks that someone with super long nails couldn't. But would you ever want to have nails that long? At number 7. Long neck style. In many cultures around the world and for many years, having a long neck was considered beautiful, and so many women practice neck stretching in order to attain this level of beauty. This practice of neck stretching has been most commonly done by wearing metal rings around the neck, adding more and more rings over time. This practice was first seen sometime around the 11th century in Southeast Asia. The theory behind the rings is that they're so thick that they push the head up, therefore stretching the neck, but in actuality, the lengthening of the neck is caused by the rings pushing down on the collarbones. The origin of this practice is pretty much unknown, but it is theorized that it began as a way to make women look more attractive in order to prevent getting captured as slaves, but on the other hand, some people believe that this was a way of protecting people from getting attacked by tigers. Two very different theories, but nonetheless valid. Though this practice began so long ago, it is still a traditional body modification in some parts of the world to this day. At number 6. Tiny tootsies. For many years, having the tiniest feet was seen as a popular beauty trend in China. Foot binding was a big body modification practice in China that began in the 10th century AD. It is said that this whole trend started because a court dancer bound her feet, and the emperor at the time, Emperor Liu, really liked what he saw, and soon it was encouraged for other women to do the same. Soon this practice of foot binding became a huge trend, and it became associated with being able to find a husband. The practice of foot binding began when a girl was 5 or 6 years old. They would have their feet put in hot water, have their nails cut short, and have their skin rubbed with oil before having their 4 smallest toes broken, folded over, and tied down. Then their feet would be bent in the middle to break the arch, and the girl would have to walk around like that over time, crushing the heel and sole of the foot. After about 2 years, the foot would be considered ready, and depending on the size of the girl's foot by the end, this would judge how easily she'd be able to be matched with a good husband. This practice continued all the way until the 20th century, where it started to lose popularity. At number 5, long skulls. One of the most bizarre beauty trends from ancient times, at least, was the process of head shaping. This unusual beauty trend caused people in modern times to think that aliens were real when remains were discovered with oddly shaped skulls. Some people believe that we had proven the existence of extraterrestrials, but in reality it led to the discovery of an entire practice of human body modification for the purpose of beauty. The process of head shaping involves putting some kind of pressure on a baby's head so that it grows into a different shape. This was known to be done by using cloth or even boards to create the desired shape. This is one of the oldest beauty trends in history, as the earliest evidence of modified skulls come from Australia and date back between 14,000 and 9,000 years ago. The skulls that were found had flattened foreheads and very prominent brow ridges. This practice also occurred quite often in South America, where skulls with a variety of different shapes have also been found. I'm kind of glad that we don't do this anymore, because I could not imagine going through life with a cone head. I wonder how it would feel to have a head shaped like that. My neck hurts just thinking about it. At number 4, 5 head. Let's go back to the Renaissance for a bit to talk about yet another one of their super strange beauty trends. They really had a lot of weird desires when it came to appearances, and I'm certainly glad that this next one is no longer in style, and I really hope it never makes a comeback. Back in the Renaissance, it was believed that girls with high curved foreheads were the most beautiful, but obviously not everyone can be built like that. As people do, they came up with a way of achieving this look without having to be born with said attributes. In order to have that big forehead that people so desired, women were known to have shaved or plucked the hairs from their natural hairline to make their foreheads look bigger and therefore more desirable. They really said, receding hairline, but make it fashion, I suppose. At number 3, feet painting. Now you would think that all of the super bizarre beauty trends of the past were from way back in the day, but you would be mistaken. We saw some strange practices in the 20th century as well, especially during war times. Back in World War II, a shortage of silk and nylon in America created a bizarre beauty trend. Because these materials were needed to make things like parachutes and uniforms for troops, tights were quickly disappearing from stores. Because this was such a huge staple in women's fashion, they got creative and created a beauty trend where women would draw pantyhose arrows in their legs, dye them with different colors, and try and mimic the look of mesh tights to create an illusion close to wearing stockings. I feel like if this happened in today's time, I don't think I would be that desperate to do that, and you couldn't catch me drawing or dyeing my legs for this. I think I'll just stick to wearing pants. At number 2, strange corsets. Corsets have been around for a long time. They've come in and out of style, and even right now, corsets seem to be making their way back into mainstream fashion, though maybe not as extreme as back in the day. In the 19th century, having an hourglass figure was seen as the ideal body type, and so in order for many women to achieve this look, they wore corsets to cinch their waists. However, the looks were pretty extreme. Some women tightened their corsets so tight that their waist could be wrapped with 2 hands. Like, imagine that. Although this was seen as super chic back in the day, it was also causing some health issues because it would squish together people's organs, and as you can imagine, that's not a good thing. Eventually, corsets evolved so that rather than cinch the waist so much, it would just accentuate the hips to still give an hourglass shape without causing too much bodily harm. And finally, at number 1, no piercings. How many of you guys out there have piercings? I have a few myself. I have my ears pierced, and obviously my nose is pierced. But there are so many other places that you can get pierced, even in the no region. Back in the Victorian era, piercings down under were pretty popular and were considered to be very fashionable amongst wealthy women. Some women would have their nippies pierced and even chained together, and some men would even get their peepees some jewelry too. For women, it was all about trends, but for men back then, many of them got their nether regions pierced supposedly to make wearing tight pants more comfortable. This piercing was called the Prince Albert, and it was given that name based on the legend that Prince Albert got his little prince pierced in order to hide the size of his junk underneath his clothes. Whether or not that's actually true is beyond me, but I would imagine that getting that piercing would be painful. Absolutely painful. But remember, in the wise words of Beyonce, pretty hurts. Oh boy, was she right. Now before we wrap things up for today, I want you guys to tell me what beauty trends you think were pretty weird. I would have to say that these super thin eyebrows from the early 2000s were pretty weird because it had a lot of people looking ooky and spooky.
And coming in at number 10, stiff collars. This early 1900s invention was accidental by nature, but seems absolutely painful just hearing about it. The detachable collar or stiff collar, created by Hannah Montague in New York in 1827, has been coined the father killer. But why? Well, this stiff detachable collar is so stiff that men could die from just wearing it. Yeah, basically just rubbing your jugular up against it all day would restrict oxygen to the brain. You could pass out or even die. This man was killed by a collar! So basically your own collar is rear naked choking the shit out of you all day. I thought the tie was the worst part. Made out of usually a separate material to the shirt pinned onto, the removable, starched to absolute hell and back collar basically turns as a sharp and rigid on your neck as a knife. Pain is beauty, darling. Apparently men would fall asleep after a couple of drinks or succumb to a catnap and sometimes not even wake up at all. Dressed to death. Literally.
Number 9. Mini bowler hats. Ah yes, are you tired of bowler hats fitting on your head properly? Are you stuck in the 1940s and you're now tired of regular sized, properly fitting bowler hats? Well, fear not, old heads. Introducing mini bowler hats. Yep, that right there is fashion right there, folks. Take something that's already working and then just jazz it up, just mess it up just a little bit. This look didn't last too long because only a few could pull it off, obviously. The hat wouldn't fit on your head, that was the whole point. A hat that isn't supposed to fit. It was always sideways and like dainty, it was kind of half off. Any swift breeze comes along, good game, the hat's gone. Now you're chasing a mini bowler hat down the road like it's a silent film.
Whoa, oops, sorry, my hat.
Harper's Bazaar deemed the mini bowler hat one of the worst of the 1940s. Yeah, I see a lot of hats now that aren't on all the way. Drives me nuts. I just wanna put it on. It's always like about to flap off. I'm like, you're gonna lose it, man. The wind's gonna come, you're gonna lose that hat. It's a nice hat.
Number 8, bad teeth. If you've had a couple root canals like me and enjoy the taste and feel of your tongue ripped to shreds after a big old bag of sours, well, then this one's for you. Opposed to the nice clean white smile we all strive for today, back then the sight of bad teeth was actually, well, charming. It usually meant you had a lot of money. Ah, those disgusting peasants and their hygiene. Teeth have a lifespan on their own, and the white discoloration from poor hygiene happens to all of us on its own. But the best method and the fastest method to ensure that those little chompers become stinky and brown, sugar. Which, if you were living anywhere between the 12th and 19th century, was very expensive and really hard to come by. So why the fashion craze? Well, it's got multiple purposes. For instance, in Southeast Asian cultures, blackening one's teeth, or the Japanese ohaguro, was seen as both a beauty standard and a tooth preserver. This process would happen by coating the teeth in a mixture of goop, usually made out of iron, vinegar, and vegetable tannin to dye the teeth black. Queen Elizabeth is a great example of this beauty standard. She would basically just smash a sugar goop into her mouth every day to purposely destroy her teeth. The more infected and discolored the teeth, the better. Ew.
Number 7, propeller hats. Okay, I'm coming for hats in this video, it seems. Sorry about that. Propeller hats in Super Mario, very practical. A lot of Goombas, sudden gusts of wind, plus a few warp pipes. You're gonna need a lift or two, right? Fair. The summer of 1947, not that windy, folks. Not windy enough for propeller hats, I'll tell you that for free. Why are teens in the 40s wearing airport runway anemometers on their heads? Why? We don't need to know the wind velocity outside, just go eat some ice cream. Well, it started with a cartoonist named Ray Faraday Nelson. See, he used this propeller hat in a cartoon, and then later on at a sci-fi convention, he had the cartoon there with a real-life propeller hat. And everyone was like, what, how? How did he just do that? This of course swept the nation just like the fidget spinner. Brands made their own versions, they hopped on the trend quickly. So quick in fact that Nelson never had time to even secure a patent for this new fresh idea. Yeah, it was too late. He didn't get a dime from the hats, and we didn't get the gift of solo flight. So let's call it even, right?
Number 6, ruffs. With silken coats and caps and golden rings, with ruffs and cuffs and farthingales and things. Taming of the Shrew, Act 4, Scene 3. Ah yes, the theatre and the ruff. Well, not that rough, but quite literally theatre in a ruff. A ruff, I sound like a dog. A ruff, or also known as the Elizabethan collar, was an interchangeable piece of cloth that could itself be laundered separately while keeping the wearer's gown from not being soiled at the neckline. Long story short, no Chef Boyardee spilling out of your mouth and down onto your clothes. Hey, that's a good idea. The stiffness of the garment forced upright posture and poise. Most ruffs could only be worn once due to its longevity and structure. Made out of a very fine material like silk, their light and delicate material, design, and size led them to become a symbol of wealth and status amongst the upper class. There was even a time where blue dyed ruffs were against the law in England since it resembled Scotland's colours on its flag. It shall only be of two primary colours, yellow and blood. Oh, red.
Number 5, smoke break jackets. Here we go. Hey, remember Hugh Hefner? Yeah, not only did he treat women like but he also dressed like it completely. Yeah, rather fitting if you ask me. Guy would wear a stinky maroon colored jacket and then sit there and blow smoke in your face all night. What an icon. Guy changed history. He would wear what's called a smoking jacket. That's what this garbage is. They were around in the 1600s, but they really peaked popularity in the 1920s, when Hugh was like 56 years old, you know what I mean? These jackets were designed for gentlemen, I mean obviously, you know, they were designed as bathrobes with class. They were made of this velvet cloth, perfect for soaking up cigar smoke and further accusations. God rest his soul. He really left his mark in history, didn't he?
Number 4, corsets. Okay, we know literally everything about these things, but you don't, so listen up. If you have to put your foot in the middle of my back to lace me up, yeah, it's too tight. Or is it? A stiff and rigid piece of clothing that I could definitely use for my posture. The corset, first invented in Italy, then France, then England, the rigid posture and protective garment around the kidneys, ribs, and vital organs under a knight's armor were adopted for style, class, and shape. Most popularized during the 16th century, this slim and sleek look was adored and worn by all classes. The best way for a woman to shape her bust, a man's chest straight and high while riding, and a great way to lose consciousness. No, I can breathe. Go a bit tighter. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, thank you. Usually made out of something strong like whalebone or wood. The stitched corsets would maintain its hard shape and the wearer would basically just be stitched in for the entirety of the day. That sounds comfortable.
Number 3, hammer pants. Okay, look, Kyle and I were on a dance team or two growing up. We get it. Baggy pants, extra zippers that don't even have pockets that are far too shallow to hold even that of a chapstick. We get it, okay? We love a good pair of dance pants. The hammer pants from the 90s, I don't think that was it. We should have heeded MC Hammer's warning and not touched it. You know what I mean? The man turned 60 this year, so we have to now look back on the truth. From him. MC Hammer himself has made it very clear. He says, quote, "Don't call them parachute pants. I detest the term." End quote. Yeah, man of few words, but you know what? When you sing that many songs, you don't need to speak anymore. Obviously, MC Hammer didn't invent this style, but it's funny to see him act like he did. You know what I mean? These types of trousers initially appeared in Persia, India, and Turkey thousands of years ago, but we love your bangers, MC Hammer. All 3.
Number 2, belladonna drops. Growing up with bad vision, I've had some pretty weird things shoved into my eyes. Dirty fingers, drops, but never a scoop of berry jam. Nah, I kinda missed out on that one, I guess. Okay, maybe not jam, but the belladonna berries, though very toxic, had an unusual role in beauty standards in medieval Europe. Upon squishing this doughy-eyed remedy into your sockets, the person's, usually women's eyes, would dilate, resulting in huge, doughy puppy dog eyes, just running around town with blurred vision like you're about to get ophthalmologisted. EML49 strawberry, raspberry, blueberry, that's not, okay, what? Of course, you wouldn't be able to see how good you looked per se, as if you've ever been dilated for optometrist reasons, then you know exactly what I mean. The belladonna or beautiful woman drops got you running into walls every 2 seconds, but boy oh boy does she look beautiful.
Number 1, paper dresses. This short-lived fad was introduced in the 1960s. It was a good one. It was exactly what you think. Paper dresses, nice. Paper Mario in real life. Finally, I've always wanted this. I can already feel the paper cuts. What a nightmare this ought to be. Here we go. Paper dresses to go. That was the phrase they like to use. They said the word go twice, therefore must be a good product. The Scott Paper Company made these not expecting the reaction that it got. It caught on quickly, of course. It only took 6 months for this casual paper company to start selling more than 500,000 paper dresses. Just out of nowhere, they're like, oh, let's just try this, and then it worked. It went so well that other companies hopped on board, just like the propeller hats. Over $3 million were spent on this awful fad. Andy Warhol was even in on the mix. It was a big deal. Everybody wanted to be involved. They weren't made of flimsy printer paper. It wasn't as bad as I'm making it sound, but it certainly wasn't great either. The dress was made of disposable material called DuraWeave, before it was cool to make things out of disposable materials. Believe it or not, it was slightly water and slightly fire resistant. Unlike those puffy middle-aged dresses that immediately go whoom, and then they don't exist anymore. This one was a little bit better. Took the flame a little bit of time, right? It's been compared to the thick paper bib that you get at the dentist. Yeah, that horrible material that bunches up and pokes your neck mid-root canal while Kyle's doing stuff? It's made of that. Fun. We love history. We love beautiful fashion history.
Number 10, golden hair. Hair is important. Imagine how different George Clooney would look if he was balding. Ooh. You gotta take care of your hair. There's nothing like treating your scalp to a nice scented and moisturizing shampoo. The Incas thought this too, and reached for the next best thing. Fermented pea. Oh yes, that's right. Basically, you take a pot, you put some wee in it, and let it sit for a week. Why not? Want to stay smelling fresh, of course. I'm not sure if this would make your hair silky smooth, as I'm not frankly in the market to try this. And this one, I can firmly say that if you try this one at home, stop it. Get some help. Don't do that. We belongs in the toilet, not on top of your head. Stop. Number 9, what a crock. As if urine in the hair wasn't enough, this beauty trend comes at you from the Romans and the Greeks. The Romans and the Greeks were the peak of ancient civilizations, built beautiful monuments, and were honestly just so smart, so smart. So smart that when they saw crocodile dung, they knew right away it had some beauty properties that they just couldn't pass up. They would bathe in crocodile dung. That's right, bathe in crocodile dung. Known for its restorative and anti-aging properties, I'm just not sure how this works really. Did they heat it up or something, or did this slip into a tub with a pile of lukewarm unlawfulness? And how do they really know it had de-aging properties? I'm starting to think this knowledge might be related to the whole urine shampoo thing. This is also gonna be a hard pass for me. No thanks, I'm good. No poo in the hair. Number 8. Beauty is pain. Ladies, we all know sometimes beauty is pain. It can be a lot, or even too much sometimes. But how far are you willing to go for a little extra beauty? In ye olde times, pale skin was considered to be beautiful, but not always the easiest to obtain. Makeup is expensive and was made of lead and other lovely materials. With all that makeup being caked on, that had to feel lovely on your face. So what's the next best thing? Bloodletting, yes, that's right. In order to have that healthy twilight pale look, women found themselves relieving themselves of their blood. Bloodletting was used for other medical reasons at the time as well, but why not get two birds stoned at once? Stay healthy and achieve that beautiful complexion. I unfortunately pass out at the sight of someone else's blood, so the loss of my own just to be pale would not bode well for me. I will have to hard pass on this trend as well. Plus, look at these rosy cheeks. I don't want to lose that. I think it makes me look cute. Number 7, mice-flavored toothpaste. It's ancient Egypt. Life is great. You got the pyramids, you got the Nile River, and you got some guy who claims to be a doctor and he's pulling out the brains of your last king through his nose so he can be mummified for the afterlife. That's just awesome. Just another day under Ra's warm sand. Egyptians just knew how to live, and they knew dental hygiene was important. So they came up with toothpaste. Sore tooth? Try this toothpaste. What was this toothpaste made of, you ask? Well, it was made of crushed mice, of course. Oh, God. I mean, here I am thinking that just some herbs crushed up with some water would be fine to eliminate bad breath, but after all, having nice teeth and nice breath is sexy. So the Egyptians took some mice and they crushed them up with other ingredients in what must have been the most foul and rancid concoction this side of the Nile River. Just go ahead, put that goop in your mouth. You'll look okay, you'll look great after. Oh, just brush it on there, smells great. Oh, that's amazing. Number 6, pearly blacks. Here's another beauty trend brought to you by the horrifying things we as human beings can do to a mouth. In Japan, there's a practice called ohaguro, which just translates to blackening of teeth. Japanese women would essentially, over time, dye their teeth black. Another dual purpose, as it was thought to preserve teeth in old age, and was seen as a sign of beauty. something that separates humans from beasts, or so they thought. The dye itself was similar to some inks, as the process involved dissolving iron, vinegar, and some oils. After this process, a concoction is made that is a non-water soluble and acts like a dye when applied to the teeth. Yet again, as a semi-charming internet host, I am going to pass on this opportunity. Plus, who am I to judge? Japan has given us lots of fun stuff, lots of great stuff. They're awesome. Mario, Zelda, Little Mac? Basically, I'm a Nintendo nerd, so I can never speak ill of the land of my favorite games. Even if the whole black teeth thing only ended like 150 years ago, which, when you think about it, isn't that long ago. Number 5. Rationing legs. World War II was a war fought everywhere, and that includes at home. Go ahead and ask your grandparents what it was like. It was only a nickel for a bus ticket, and the movies had newsreels. Yes, it's 3 o'clock and I'm ready for dinner. See, that's what they say. Go ahead and ask them, they'll tell you. Well, okay, Grandma, but on a serious note, people had to ration food for the war effort. They also had to ration other goods that you might not expect, like ladies' nylon stockings. In Britain, nylon stockings were all the rage, but the materials for such were needed for the war effort. So the Gravy Browning Company came up with a bright idea: just paint your stockings on. Some women actually did this, and sometimes would even draw on the seam with an eyebrow pencil just to make it look like the real thing. Ooh. However, I just cannot see this being a great idea. I mean, it rains a lot in Britain. Would it not just wash off? What if I get sweaty running for my bus because I'm late for work? Yup, this is another one I'm just gonna have to pass up on. I'm sure the pain was 100% safe for body application as well. It probably wasn't. Number 4, bad hair days. Alright, this one is generalizing, but hear me out. When was the last time you thought about haircuts in the past? Yeah, see, you don't. That's because they belong in the past. I'm talking about popular hairstyles from the 1950s to 2000s, because honestly, there was a lot of them. And honestly, what were we thinking? We are a species that has left our own planet through science and technology. Yet, we come up with hairstyles like the beehive, the mullet, everything in the 1980s, and the most heinous, atrocious hairstyle ever, frosted tips. Sorry, Guy Fieri. The list goes on, but my point is people fully went out in public with these crazy hairstyles. I, myself, may or may not have sinned and maybe had frosted tips at one point in my life. I maybe had a button-up shirt with a blue Hot Rod Flames on it. But I'm not gonna tell you the complete truth. After being a part of this trend, I can firmly say I no longer want to participate in any more bad hair days or blue flamed shirts. Number 3, you do what with Maui? Back to the Romans again, and back to the pee. At least the Incas were keeping it outside the body. I guess. Romans wanted a clean mouth, and there wasn't any minty fresh mouthwash to reach for. So, what do you use? We. Lots of we, specifically Portuguese we. It was just the most sought after. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I feel like there was more wine drinking than water drinking in Rome. More than people would like to admit it. So, if that is the byproduct of all that wine drinking, and you're giving that a swish in your mouth, well, all I can say is I'm just gonna give that a big pass on playing Spin the Bottle. Number 2, my little weight loss friend. Okay, I get it. It makes perfect sense. The numbers add up here. But all I'm gonna say is, the chief knows medicine, and he said this is a hard pass for me, and it ain't it. If you want to shed that extra winter weight and be beach body ready with minimal effort and still enjoy deep fried chocolate bars, then you have only one thing to do, and that is swallow tapeworms. Where a tapeworm will grow inside your body and help eat those unwanted calories. Trouble is, you can get very sick, and if the tapeworm attaches itself to something that is, well, vital for your living, you're going to have a bad time. You'll get sick. Just don't do this one, please. Don't swallow tapeworms, please. Don't do it. Number 1, I spy some great complexion. Arsenic cookies. I'm just gonna be blunt with this one. Women were eating arsenic cookies for their complexion. You could straight up just walk into a Sears in 1902 and just buy some. It says it's safe on the box. For people who aren't familiar with arsenic, it's poison. Spies often carry one in pill form to unalive themselves in case of capture. At this time in history, it was no secret what arsenic was. This is just kind of weird, like putting ketchup on your eggs. Kind of weird. That's just a joke. We're having a debate here in the office, and I'm just curious to see who does that. But back to the poison. It was not safe, and over time, with lots of exposure, you can get very sick. It's arsenic, it's poison. Don't do that one either. Why? That's just wrong. Oh man.
Kicking off the list at number 10, skincare routines. For a long time now, having pale skin in Europe meant that you were among the wealthy, because in the 17th and 18th century, this suggested you could enjoy the indoors. You didn't get sunburns working outside all day, aka wealth. Keep in mind, this was long before sunscreen was ever even a thing, so at the time, the best thing to wash your face with was something called chemical wash. That was a mighty wash. This thing packed a punch, that's for sure. This wash would ideally get rid of sunburns, pimples, ringworms, smallpox, scurf, or morphew. I don't even know what scurf is, but it sounds awful. I don't want it. And your skin afterwards would be pale and literally glowing. Thing is, all these foundations were made with old-timey, horrible, poisonous recipes. One of these facial creams, I swear, I'm not making it up, was literally this. Steep the lead in a pot of vinegar and rest it in a bed of horse manure for at least 3 weeks. What? I'm trying to get rid of bags under my eyes. How am I supposed to steep lead? What am I, Walter White? I don't know how to steep lead. I can barely steep tea, let alone lead. Moving on, now I'm upset. Number 9, natural or painted. Today, the internet is full of makeup tutorials in every corner. Doesn't matter what style you're looking for, help is now available. You can learn how to draw on eyebrows while listening to a true crime story. You know what I'm saying? It's perfect. The makeup game is crazy, but back in the 1800s, you only had 2 looks to choose from, really. You had the painted look or the natural look. Natural was light on the makeup, more of a paste look than anything, almost like you're a Victorian painting, you know? One of those. But to achieve the lighter look, Europeans would use actual paint, like paint. Just lead-based paint. And the most important part of applying this is that you can't smile. You can't even move at all. Any emotion will cause the paint to literally crack. Again, that's why all these paintings are so serious. Madame X, the portrait of Virginie Amélie Avegno-Gautreau, originally painted back in 1884. At first, Sargent made the woman's strap slipping off her shoulder. That was a little, scandalous, a little oopsies. That was deemed too scandalous for the upper class society around him back in the 1800s, so John had to literally repaint these straps back on. Yeah, backlash was so strong, John had to move after he sold the painting. The guy left Paris because of spaghetti straps. What a nightmare. But this is what I'm talking about. You start drawing veins on pale skin, people would lose their mind. Love that pale veininess. Number 8, beauty patches. 1800s beauty patches came in many different shapes and sizes. Take this portrait from 1755, for example. Joshua Reynolds painted Charles IX, Lord Cathcart, rocking a pretty large beauty patch. The guy literally looks like the rapper Nelly. That's massive, it looks like a band-aid on his cheek. Whereas other fabrics used in the 18th century were much smaller. They were tiny circles, hearts, stars. If you found this, you'd think somebody was gearing up to go to an Arctic Monkeys concert. They were often used to cover up smallpox scars. They were made out of silk velvet and they were applied with glue. Now the patches were dark black to make the pale pop, but the location of where these went also had purpose. A beauty patch in the corner of your eye meant that you had a lot of passion. On the forehead, that was meant to be majestic, and a dimple patch, oh, well, you're a cheeky one. That's the scandalous one you are. The position of these patches could also determine your political allegiance. Historian Joseph Addison took notes on these positions when observing 2 parties from the 1800s. One party had patches on the right side of their face and the other had the opposite. That's like switching jerseys back in the 1800s. You're like, this team sucks. Number 7, mouse skin eyebrows. Okay, Stuart Little, if you're watching this, skip to number 6. You don't want to see any of this, alright? Trust me, it's not good. Back in the 1800s, as I mentioned earlier, the cosmetic game was harsh, to say the least. The eyebrows too, they had a rough go. Eyebrows were completely plucked off back then in order to make the forehead bigger. Yeah, you need that 1800s 5 head. That's the trick, apparently. Imagine if I shaved my eyebrows off and then painted my face like pale white. Honestly, I'd do it for the clicks. I'd do it for you guys. This 5 head look didn't last forever, thankfully, but for a hot minute, it almost got worse. In the late 17th century and early 18th century, these leading ladies would shave off their eyebrows, and then they would glue on mouse skin to replace them. Like a band-aid, only horrible and stinky. Since their face was freshly painted and the glue game was weak, they would have one shot only to stick these puppies on. You just gotta eyeball it and hope that it works and that it looks in the right spot. I don't know. You put them on too low, you're gonna look upset all day long. Eyebrows are angry sisters, not angry twins, okay? Remember that. Number 6, lip paint. Red lips always lie, especially when you don't know that ammonia is mixed in with it. How jolly. Back in the Victorian era, the pale look, red lips, beauty marks, you were trying to look like a literal queen. That was the whole point. So women in the 1800s would either make their own compound themselves, which didn't work obviously, or if they had some money, they would buy some. The main ingredient in these days were not ideal. Crushed up insects, which already could cause allergic reactions when applied to your lips, but the ammonia mixed in really put the nail in the coffin at that point. Ammonia and crushed bugs? What am I, Oogie Boogie? What am I making here? What am I applying? Number 5, corsets. I can't even imagine how hard it was to wear one of these. Like, I have no chest. I'm just a diving board, and already this is a nightmare. I can't even imagine. The Victorian corset, okay. Tiny waist, curves, look, the whole thing. Obviously, this was horrible for your body. Just looking at this, you're like, ugh. Your ribs would literally slowly deform, as well as your spine misaligning. But instead of talking about how horrible this obvious one was, let's talk about that corset duel from 1836. Yeah, have you heard about this? That's a real thing. Hungarian Princess Pauline von Metternich was married to Prince Clemens. She had to marry her uncle when she was 20 back in the 1850s, so surprise, surprise, she was a little unhappy. Weird, right? So since the marriage began, her husband, he was involved in numerous affairs. He liked going after actresses or singers, whatever. He barely paid any attention to her. That is until, you know, she started to have fun in life. Then he's like, ugh, what are you doing? Yeah, once she got over this gross prince, she had a great time. She drank, she smoked, she defied convention, but most notably, her duel in the summer of 1892. She challenged another royal, a countess, to a duel, in nothing but a corset. How badass is that? To this day, it's not yet determined who won per se, but a princess dueling in the dark after some drinks? Yeah, that should be a musical. Forget Frozen. I want to watch this on DVD, let's go. Number 4, deadly nightshade. Macbeth's soldiers used deadly nightshade to poison their enemies. And during the Victorian age, women would apply nightshade to their eyes, just so they look nice. Awesome, so this is horrible. Let's talk about it. The pupils would become larger after this, okay? That was the whole point of putting poison in your eyeballs. The thing that makes deadly nightshade so commonly known is the sweetness of the berries. Have you ever been outside and you see a berry and like 30% of you really wants to eat that berry? Well, curiosity kills. Deadly nightshade can be found in Europe, Asia, and Africa. It grows purple flowers in groups of 3, along with those inviting purple berries. Just 2 to 4 berries can kill a human being, so don't. When in doubt, just don't eat them. And the flower as well. Don't ingest this, you'll get poisoned. And also, don't put any near your eyeballs, in this century or the next. Number 3, bustles. So while corsets are one nightmare, bustles are just an entirely new thing. Tiny waist wasn't enough, eh? Had to get big old dump trucks as well? These Victorian folks went hard in the paint. Figuratively and literally, I guess. Bustles were also known as the Grecian bend. Big old booty bend, that's it. It came to town in the 1870s and it took the idea of wearing a cage as a skirt to just having the back part extend out. Ah yes, an update, an upgrade, I guess. Then the fabric was draped behind the butt. Hope you don't like sitting down ever, because that's obviously not an option. Corsets would move your organs around slowly, and bustles would slowly damage your back. So let's leave this one in the 1800s. I think that's probably for the best. Number 2, red lead redemption. Look, I'm pretty new to skincare routines, but I'm trying, okay? I'm trying to get rid of these bags under my eyes. I'm trying to sleep and drink water, all that jazz. Back in the 18th century, those bags under your eyes were a lot harder to get rid of. Lead mixed with vinegar, this would make you look more pale. If I used this, I would literally be a ghost. I would just be invisible. You would just hear a voice in a green screen right now. In the 18th century, that pale look was ideal, but this lead vinegar mix also smoothed out your face. So what could go wrong, right? Queen Elizabeth I used cosmetics containing lead, mercury, and arsenic. Those powerful 3 things you don't want anywhere near your face. Yeah, arsenic too, the same deadly poison that took out George III and Napoleon Bonaparte. Just the worst ingredients in the 1800s cosmetics game, really. The Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry has arsenic on its priority list of hazardous substances. Toxic metal exposure is still an issue we're facing today in this century, so I hope this is eye-opening. Sans poison eye drops, I hope it's eye-opening. And finally, coming in at number 1, deodorant. What did people even do before Old Spice? You know, before that guy was born, how did we know how to smell good? What did we know how to do? Deodorant was first introduced to the public back in the late 1800s, and it was called Mum. It was a cream that used zinc oxide, and it was stored in metal, cold containers. That's just nothing like speed stick at all. It's not discreet in any way, shape, or form. It wasn't long until the first antiperspirant came along right after it. It was called EverDry, and it was always damp, ironically, and it would always burn your underarms. It literally would eat through your clothes. I think at that point, I'd rather smell bad. Like, let me have rashes, let my face look horrible, let the bags show. I'd rather do all that than any of this. This is horrible. Kicking off the list at number 10, arsenic dresses. If looks could kill, here we go. Back in 1861, a poet by the name of Henry Wadshaw Longfellow, great last name, really love that. His wife Fanny, her dress caught on fire, and her burns were so bad that she sadly didn't survive. These dresses back then, they were flammable as is, and the fact that candles were used everywhere obviously didn't help. You're a walking ball of cotton, and some of these dresses were 6 feet wide cages, literally. I'll get into that later on. But arsenic dresses were on a whole new level of deadly. Even without the lit candles, this dress could already just kill you. Arsenic was used back then to get that green look. Real arsenic was used. It wasn't just in clothing either. Back in 1861, an artificial flower maker named Matilda Schurer used green arsenic-laced powder and ended up dying a horrible way. Her fingernails had turned green, green foam was coming out of their mouth, the whites of her eyes had turned green. Arsenic is not supposed to be inhaled, let alone worn. Yeah, the 1800s were a wild time. And believe me, it only gets weirder from here. Number 9, the hobble skirt. Here we go. We're gonna slowly walk like penguins for this one. Just from this 1910 headline alone, the hobble skirt sounds like a good time. The June 12 headline reads, "The hobble is the latest freak in women fashion. Skirts that are so tight around the ankle that locomotion is seriously impeded and speed is impossible." Doesn't that pull you in? I want one already. Let's do it. French designer Paul Poiret made these to free the bust while shackling the legs. Just what you need to move around on uneven stone roads back hundreds of years ago. We love it. Love the practicality of the outfit. Despite how ridiculous and unsafe the hobble skirt looks and is, only the wealthy could afford such a thing. Middle and lower class women wore skirts with slits or buttons like losers. Ha! What are you, walking? So they could actually walk around, you know? What a weird thing to do. These hobble skirts were worn by the fancy, and they were like, we don't walk, we're too fancy for that. We'll just stand in one place and do this a lot. And also this, I guess. I don't know what this is. These hobble skirts were so popular at the time that upper class folks sought out a new fashion trend that made them look even fancier than the rest. So they just did it for clout. And they look stupid. I'll say it, they look kind of stupid. Number 8, macaroni. This one's extra cheesy. Macaroni joke, we got it. Back in the mid-1700s, aristocratic British men would wear these large wigs, and I mean large wigs. These things were comedically big, but what would make them so unique was the tiny little hat on top of this massive wig. Or it was a feather or a little hat. A little Monopoly-sized piece hat, just right on top of this. The Yankee Doodle rhyme mentions this macaroni. That's the macaroni they're referring to. Stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. He called it KD mac and cheese. These British men were inspired after traveling across Europe, and it's named after macaroni like the pasta because it signifies sophistication and worldliness. Every time I eat KD, I'll be like, sophistication. That was the whole point of the rhyme, that any average Joe can just put an old feather in their hair and then be as valuable as macaroni. You can be macaroni, guys. You can do it. Hit that thumbs up, and then we'll all be macaroni. Number 7, the hoop skirt. The hoop skirt is way too much. I mean, for starters, it looks like something you would find on a playground. Children can for sure do chin-ups on the hoop skirt. These skirts were 6 foot wide, like hoops. They were the talk of the town. Would have been perfect for the pandemic, actually. 6x6. Nice. They were the talk of the town around the 1700s, and it was often handmade from whalebone or basket willow. And if you attended King Louis XVI's court, it might as well be a packed bar. You're sneaking by everybody, these small passageways between people, and they're now 6 foot hoop radius skirts. It's not practical at all, but they did look fancy. Later on in the mid-1800s, a newer version of the skirt came out, and these were better because they were made of steel. I'm not joking. This was considered new and or improved. They could produce these more often now being made of steel, so this was really the first time in history where your legs could also actually move around while you looked good. We went from hobble skirts to cage skirts. I think we're getting better. I think, maybe? Number 6, paper dresses. Okay, we're not getting better at all. Moving on to some modern fashion trends, this short-lived fad was introduced in the 1960s. Paper dresses. Yes, it's as ridiculous as it sounds. Paper dresses to go-go. Just don't spill anything at all or make any sudden movements and you're good. You ever played Paper Mario? You're basically cosplaying Paper Mario. The Scott Paper Company made these, not expecting the reaction that it got. It caught on quick, of course. Fidget spinners were only 4 years ago, so if you want to talk about paper dresses, open that cupboard and check yourself before you wreck yourself. It only took 6 months for this casual paper company to start selling more than 500,000 paper dresses. They couldn't even keep up with this work. It went so well that other companies hopped on board and they too began making these paper dresses. It was just everywhere. Over $3 million were spent on this fad. Andy Warhol was even in on the mix at one point. It was a big deal. They weren't made of flimsy printer paper either. It wasn't as bad as I'm making it sound, but it certainly wasn't good either. The dress was made of a disposable material called DuraWeave. Believe it or not, slightly water and slightly fire resistant. Unlike those puffy middle-aged dresses, it was a bit better. It's been compared to the thick paper bib that you get when you're at the dentist, that flimsy material that bunches up and then pokes your neck. It has like the weird chain that's not really connected too well with that tiny little clip thing. It's made of that. A whole dress made of that. Have fun at prom. Don't light on fire. Number 5, wax cones. This next one we need to bring back. I'm tired of washing my beanie. It smells, you don't want to know, honestly. Head cones, also known as perfume cones, were used in ancient Egypt. We're going way back for this one. They would sit on top of your head, and back in 2019 we actually found evidence that they were in fact used. Before then we just saw them on paintings and such. What would happen is men and women would wear this cone, and your body heat would slowly melt the wax cone, and the cone itself was made of oils, fats, resins, and it would be placed on their wig or directly on their head to make them smell better as the day went by. As fascinating as ancient Egyptian culture is, I don't think anybody misses wax cones. Number 4, Krakos. Today's footwear is pretty comfortable. We have shoes that correct your stride while you take your morning jog. We have Crocs, which, they're just a blessing, just in general. They're great. Krakos were a style of shoe commonly worn in the 15th century in Europe. The thing with these long-toed shoes, they first appeared in the 12th century and they would come and go over time as most fashion trends do. But the Krako, this thing was twice as long as your foot. People are tripping over these things left, right, and center. They look ridiculous. Why were they so long? Why did they keep coming back over and over? Named after the city, of course, that they were made in, Krakos were used by both men and women, but as cheeky as it sounds, the longer the shoe, the cooler the dude. Yeah, size did matter. These things would be stuffed with horsehair or moss, but the insane part is that these things were so long, a string would have to be tied from the tip of the shoe to your knee, so it was like, had to have the cool curve. You had to have that interesting curve. We need to bring these back immediately. Imagine tying a Krako to your knee before prom. You'd be fired up. You'd be doing like the sea walk in no time. Number 3, wigs. Okay, I mentioned the macaroni look, little hat with a big wig, but wigs were such a big deal that they deserve their own point on this list. You see it so often in movies and TV, any plot that takes place in the early 17th century, it's just wigs galore. This all began when Louis XIII of France wore a wig to hide his baldness. Yeah, people love copying royalty. Even when Queen Elizabeth's teeth were black and rotten from eating so many sweets, people copied that look. They made their teeth look rotten because, well, obviously that's the cool thing. Gross, don't do that. Brush your teeth. In the 17th century, syphilis was also to blame. This was a bad time in Europe, of course, long before antibiotics. Most things were pretty bad. But the side effects of syphilis include sores and hair loss. What better way to hide the fact that you're losing a bit of hair than to wear a wig 9 times as noticeable in public than if you were just to have patchy hair? This is a solution, I guess. It kicked off with Louis XIV at just age 17. He hired 50 wig makers. His cousin, Charles II, he was going gray around the same time, so he too wore a wig, and then everyone thought wigs were cool, and then Bob's your uncle. I'm starting to go gray already. Next time you see me, I'll be wearing a 17th century lice-filled, flammable, stinky wig, because that's better, apparently. Number 2, bombasting. The origin of stuffing your bra. Let's do it. Mr. Boombastic. Is it fantastic after all? What does it even mean to call somebody boombastic? What is this? Well, back in the 16th century, if you looked like a literal couch, you were considered royalty. The bigger the belly, the bigger the arms, the bigger the everything, the better. Size mattered a lot back then. Men and women would stuff cotton, wool, or sawdust. Yeah, they would stuff sawdust in their clothing to appear more muscular, or to seem like they ate a lot. Now it's so funny because while of course this makes sense in history and stuff like I just mentioned, the legs of these guys were always so tiny. They would more often than not make their arms look ripped and their bellies huge, but they still needed to move around and be like, ah yes, and like, that whole my lady stuff. A guy the size of a minivan isn't intimidating. It looks more uncomfortable than anything. And in case you're wondering, yes, men would usually stuff just one part of their trousers. That's just false advertising, my friend. And finally, number 1, bustles. All that junk inside your trunk. What are you going to do with it? Saving my personal favorite for last, of course, Bustles were a fun little mix of everything on this list. This was also known as the Grecian Bend and came to town in the 1870s. Now remember how we'd wear cage dresses that extended 6 feet and was just non-practical in any way? Well, they modified that so it was basically just your behind that was poofed out. This fabric was draped behind the butt, that was the fabric was usually draped behind the butt, that was the original style, but some people got smart and began stuffing the back just to make it, a little higher, a little bit bigger, a little more, to it, and then eventually you look like an absolute dump truck. So some eyes were facing you, which was a bonus back then. The bustle, looking back at it, pun intended, is ridiculous. This was not comfortable or practical at all. It began as a small piece of fabric that would hold the dress up, and then it became this. Whenever I see this style, I always think of Aunt Fanny from the movie Robots. That movie is criminally underrated.
Number 10, chopins. These ancient slippers-ish shoes were used for more than just throwing at the heads of your unruly teenagers. Imagine catching a hardwood 14-inch chopin across your butt thrown at you like a 90-mile fastball. Solid wood too. Just a huge block, just Originally worn and seen on the women in the 15th and 16th and 17th century Italy and France, these huge platform heels were designed for sliding over your shoes and socks to keep them dry and clean from the mud and the muck. Rule of thumb was, higher the chopin, higher the class. Most of the time, these platform shoes are so high that you would need an assistant just to help you get around. Yeah. No, I don't. I want to go this way, please. Thank you. Walking all over the place like Gene Simmons, 14 feet high. Great way to roll your ankle. Sometimes embroidered or lined with gems and jewels, these shoes were purely decorative and pretty impractical, as you can see. No one's walking up a spiral staircase in those things. No thanks. Number 9, head cones. Egyptologists have decoded the 14th century BCE paintings about these mysterious caps worn on the heads of certain women in ancient Egypt. First assumed it was of religious or ceremonial wear and tear, researchers and archaeologists think that they've cracked the code finally. It's actually a big wad of sticky beeswax. Yeah, but it smells nice. A perfume. This ball of specific gunk sat under the cap, sitting on the crown of the head that under the sun over the course of the day would cleanse the body with pleasant smells. Mostly stuffed with either beeswax or animal fat and then packed with your favorite pleasant smelling herbs and flowers. The cap would then slowly melt on top of your head and would just drip down into the hair and down the body all day, slowly releasing a cologne shampoo hybrid sort of thing. Some were even stuffed with essential oils for the skin, and it wasn't just putting in fennel on your head at the end of the day, huh? That's nice. As of now, researchers have only been able to find women wearing these deodorant hats and paintings and carvings, and have yet to find a man wearing these ancient eau de toilettes. Ah yes, the scent of a man. Ladies, look over here. And now here. I smell disgusting. Number 8, chatelaines. These practical and very decorative accessories have been used since the 18th and 19th centuries. A deadly yet decorative fashion ending in the Victorian era. Typically a chain made of metal, usually silver, bronze, or brass, and hung from the waistband, riddled with tools and trinkets, attached to it for your everyday use. Cobblers would have cobbler stuff, dentists would have dentist stuff. Basically, this is just a cool belt chain on your jeans. Like a giant multi-tool on a keychain. Everything from vials with smelling salts, whistles, to even knives and protective devices. Just a giant set of janitor keys with different tools on it. I feel like this definitely gave way to the Swiss Army knife. Flathead or Robinson. Oh, I got a Phillips if you need. A Phillips? Yeah, go ahead. It was mobile, decorative, and personal. I'm surprised we don't have these right now. I mean, I would use it. Mine would have like 11 chapsticks on it, just all in a row, you know? Number 7, cloaks. These mobile sleeping bags have been worn as far back as ancient Greece and ancient Mesopotamia. Made out of anything from fur to wool, these usually neck to foot length portable blankets were seen as both practical and decorative, one of the most used and reused clothing technologies. I can understand why such a simple piece of material can be used for so many different things. Protect you from most elements, camouflage you when hiding, and you could pretty much make these yourselves. Some people added hoods and pockets to theirs. Harry Potter gets it, Batman gets it. These people got it. Cloaks, capes, magicians' uniforms, we still use these things to this day. We gotta bring these back with youngins, just Dracula cape someone on an exit. I mean, that's like the new mic drop. Yeah, I'll see you this weekend. Number 6, togas. Much like the cloak, a very simple and ageless garment. a loose-fitting sheet typically wrapped and folded across a person's body, seen as far back and popularized by ancient Romans. These common eggshell white dresses were used as general garb by both men and women of all classes. Think about how much red wine they would spill on these. Apparently they were big drinkers back then. Sorry, do you have any club soda? Yeah, just don't dab it, please, just blot it, thank you. And these things were huge too. You almost always needed help wrapping yourself up like a burrito. Hurry up. Usually young boys would wear purple until they were a man. If you were mourning, then you would wear dark colors, and if you were in state, you would have the typical white toga, possibly with some colorful embroidery for some class. Pretty easy, you have like 3 choices. No more throwing clothes on and on before school. No, not that, I wore that last week. Can I see the white again? This garment was eventually abandoned by women, and then the lower class, and then the upper class, and then eventually men just really wore them at frat parties. Toga! Toga! Yo, Remus Romulus, bro, they're nuts, man. Number 5. Krakows. A popular shoe first originating in what is now Poland, the Krakow gets its name from exactly this place. Krakow, or also known as poulain shoes, were worn from roughly the 13th century to the 17th century by men and women of all classes. Multi-sizable, the long pointed shoe would have been sewn to a point and just rounded at the tip. The first use, of course, was merely decorative, stuffed at the toes with usually moss or hay. As time went on, the fashion trend took off and more people were just designing long, stinky socks. Just 1420 muddy England with no arch support, slipping and sliding all over the streets. How bad did they smell too? No socks, just foot on shoe rubbing? And you know they weren't clipping those toenails. I bet they were just curled up underneath them. Ew. I guess these would have been good for all shoe sizes. Kind of like a one shoe fits all, your whole life kind of deal. Typically made out of wool or leather, these could be also crafted into metal and fitted for a knight. Like swords aren't scary enough, now I gotta dodge your pointy knife boot attack? Aha! Number 4. Powdered wigs. The powdered wig, or periwig, most famously coined after Louis XIV, started this up-and-coming trend. As far back as the 1600s, we've seen these paintings of men and women with huge white hairdos. You're thinking, that's a lot of hairspray and a lot of stress. Well, actually it wasn't even their hair. In fact, most men and women were balding underneath during these times. Yeah, syphilis, good one. Syphilis was the most popular of STDs, and one of the common side effects was patchy balding hair. Also blisters, and also sores. With the plague constantly knocking on the door, cleanliness and class was upheld in values more than anything. The powder, consisting mostly of starch and lavender, was used to powder wigs and rid them of odors, stains, and even bugs? Dude, I'm getting itchy reading this. That's right, a ton of bugs, usually in the form of lice, would be attracted to these wigs, and most of the time were infested even before their first wear. Worn by all classes, the powdered wig is an icon in fashion. It's used through so many centuries by so many different people. Just coughing non-stop while shaving your head so you don't get fleas, shaking the ants out of your head before the big dance. The common price for a decent wig would cost about a week's worth of wages. Of course, the upper class spending much higher price for larger and better quality pieces, coining the term big wigs. The rich and their bad hair pieces. Like it's jet black, you're 89 dude, let it go. Number 3, chainmail. Worn from 3rd century BC to about 16th century AD, historians point us in the direction of Celtics in Europe for the initial use and design of this shiny metal shirt. From the word burnie, the chainmail is one of the most widely known lightweight mobile armors people could really wear for one's safety. One of the most useful and practical sets of wardrobe designed for mostly military personnel, the chainmail, or commonly known as mail, was a lattice grid consisting of tightly fitted metal loops to form an almost knitted poncho. Hood, sleeve, you name it, they made it. This item of clothing would be custom fitted to your body and worn all day. I bet you'd be pretty tired because most of the time, a full jumper of mail was about 50 pounds. In the rain and the mud. That's heavy. And in the rain too? Like, did they ever get electrocuted? You're basically a giant metal golf club on top of a castle fighting with sharper metal golf clubs. Zeus just chucking thunderbolts down at you and you're just trying to keep your head up. Number 2, cod pieces. Jock, dance belt, The old stuff the sock trick. These guys did it first. And I say guys because, guys, men definitely created this. Yeah, I'll take the bigger size. The big one. Hurry up, please. Hurry up! Size mattered back then, and size of one's cod mattered. A piece of fashion designed for both safety and for boasting. Getting dressed was hard back then, and you didn't want to get your bits all caught up in any material. So the answer was the 15th century codpiece, made out of metal, wood, or leather. The codpiece was fitted around a man's stuff and securely tied to his waist belt or pantaloons, either under or over his clothes. Some believe this was designed due to the waistlines rising and the shortening of one's jacket over the years, revealing more and more of the goods. Sometimes to show off, sometimes for battle, and much like the modern jock, it did serve numerous protection reasons, but was mostly seen at the time as a fashion statement. Again, size and reputation mattered, and flaunting was all part of the 15th, 16th century culture. Louis XIV knows what's up. And step will change, sire. And number 1. Macaroni. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Yeah, that's a real song, dude. I thought my neighbor Declan made that up playing road hockey when I was 8. Near the end of the 18th century, at one of Europe's most heightened times, also known as the Age of Enlightenment, was an eclectic group of people called the Macaronis. No, not the delicious noodle, but instead a group of young men flamboyantly pushing the boundaries of fashion to even trolling it. Huh. These men were mocking the style, and in that, created another style. Yeah, that's pretty gangster, dude. Basically, you would wear the biggest wig you had, and on top, a tiny miniature hat and a feather. Just a cute little guy. Someone was definitely trying to make their friend laugh, and then it just worked. This high slang term for high fashion is thought to have originated from the elegantly dressed Italian immigrants. Elegantly noted Italian men boasting about how perfect their macaroni pasta was and throwing about the term for everything they liked or adored as macaroni. Wow, I love your shoes, they're so macaroni. Yeah, your hair's like so macaroni. It's like really macaroni, you know what I mean? The sillier and more elegant and more vibrant, the better. Men would have to walk around with ceiling-high wigs, the balance alone. Oh, okay, there we go. It was a time to show off. And the coolest part? Macaroni style was genderless. Men and women could borrow and mix match styles at this point in history, and people were digging it. It was like the 80s of the century. Well, I guess that's literally the 80s at some point. Vibrant colors, glitz and glamour, you name it, they wore it. And that's why I feel the Macaronis deserve the #1 spot here. Just the name alone, man, come on.